Hello and welcome to today's special webinar event, Simplify Container Storage in Kubernetes with Portworx and Red Hat OpenShift. Today's webinar is sponsored by Pure Storage and Red Hat and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, there are a few things you should know about this webinar. First off, we want this to be a very educational event for you, so we encourage any and all questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. We'll have team members responding to questions during the live event, and we'll get back to you on any other questions afterward. Second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. The first resource is a link to a free trial of Portworx. We also have a link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club where you can get access to Actual Tech Media's information and insight-packed printed resources on technology topics, as well as a link to the ATM Event Center where you can find more fantastic events like this one. So I encourage you to check out those resources and share them with your friends and colleagues. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky attendee on the live event. If you're watching this webinar on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. But if you are the winner, you can choose to donate the value of that gift card to one of our selected charities. Thanks to generous prize winners on previous Actual Tech Media events, thousands of dollars have been donated to charities, so thank you in advance if you make that choice today. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found at actualtechmedia.com. Scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. And with that, let's get to today's fantastic content. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today. From Pure Storage, we have Andy Gower. He's a Solutions Marketing Manager. And from Red Hat, we have Solutions Architect Jacob Gay. Let's pass things over to Andy to get us started.
Andy Gower. I work here at Portworx as the Solutions Marketing Manager. I lead all of our solutions work and our work with partners. And I'm really excited today to have Jacob on the call to talk about what we're doing with Red Hat and specifically with OpenShift and how together we're simplifying container storage and data management and allowing customers to really move workloads into production at scale with OpenShift and Portworx. Quick little roadmap for the conversation today. Jacob's going to kick off and talk about what OpenShift is doing, how OpenShift is making it easy and simple to run production workloads on top of Kubernetes and really have an enterprise-grade experience. And then I'm going to talk about what we're doing with Portworx, how we're building on that for the storage and data management layer. And then we're going to end with a couple questions. So hopefully you find this engaging. If you do, we'll have a slide at the end that talks about how you can get involved, how you can use the Portworx free trial with OpenShift. And of course, feel free to contact me. My email is down here at the bottom. And with that, Jacob, I'll turn it over to you and get things kicked off.
Thank you, Andy, and greetings all. My name is Jacob Gay, and I'm a solution architect at Red Hat, supporting our alliances and partnership independent software vendor ecosystem, or better known as ISV. I'm thrilled to join you today to discuss Red Hat OpenShift, and most importantly, how the Red Hat OpenShift application platform is the foundation for digital transformation initiatives. To thrive in the face of increasing competition, organizations must become digital leaders. And that's what we're here to discuss today, how we can help you champion those digital initiatives and get into the leading edge against other companies that may be also pursuing similar initiatives. Because organizations that do not establish a leadership position in digital transformation risk losing market share and industry relevance, resulting in diminished financial performance and possible failure. With Portworx and Red Hat, we're combining the hybrid cloud and modern storage technology to deliver transformative solutions at enterprise scale. While IT leaders have been pursuing transformation initiatives for some time, the need to offer innovative consumer experiences has reached critical levels. The COVID-19 pandemic heightened the urgency of digital transformation as businesses were forced to transition overnight from in-person to contactless sales and services, providing digital consumer experiences has become the only viable business model. And these changes are more about just the technology. To truly transform into an agile, responsive, and modern organization requires change from both the business and IT. To be successful, we want to be able to answer a few questions, for example. Those are, be able to answer the demand for new and better applications, the capabilities to modernize your infrastructure and take advantage of cloud resources so you can move more quickly. Most importantly, make the cultural and process sea changes to support these new ways of working. Because it doesn't matter how amazing and efficient your apps and infrastructure are, if your processes still contain the same old bottlenecks and manual approvals that slow you down. But hybrid is more than just a strategy for new projects or for your future requirements. It's also a logical platform design pattern for application modernization because it allows you to meet your current challenges and opportunities head on while positioning you for the future. If you're like most of our customers, you have a mix of new and old when it comes to your applications that you need to run your organizations. Most large enterprises have huge existing application portfolios that are built with traditional architectures, such as monolithic, in-tier, etc., with traditional languages such as Java and .NET, or maybe even some C++. In addition, most enterprises are building new apps or modernizing some of those existing apps with new architectures such as microservices, application programmable interfaces, APIs, with newer language and frameworks such as Spring and Quarkus. And many of them are moving now to integrate more intelligence and newer models into their apps, such as analytic capabilities with artificial intelligence and machine learning. But what about your development processes and methodology? Are they legacy as well? When embarking on this digital transformation journey, you must evolve your workflows as well. In addition to continuing to support your applications developed with a waterfall methodology, you now want to implement continuous integration, continuous development practices via a more DevSecOps mindset. And you need to provide the mix of skills that you need to support these varying methodologies because people are your most important asset and they need to adapt over time too. One of the key reasons is the born in cloud companies have changed the world by showing what they can do with these new approaches. And where are your apps? Are they in the cloud, on-premise, on bare metal servers, in virtual machines? Well, again, if you're like many of our customers, you may already be using multiple clouds in addition to your private cloud and data center, and very likely on bare metal and at the edge. So your infrastructure platforms are already hybrid. So you must ask yourself, do you have an architecture in place that is flexible enough to support this hybrid world? If your direction changes, are you able to make these adjustments quickly? Optimizing your strategy around innovation and speed for developers can transform your business regardless of where your applications are deployed. The benefits of modernizing your portfolios and leveraging next generation technologies such as cloud and enterprise storage solutions are evident, as you see here in some of the graphics listed. And a platform that is consistent across application models, across clouds, and on-prem, and across an ecosystem of software and hardware allows you to deliver fast, secure, to ensure that your platform is secure, proven, and ready for tomorrow's innovations. From expanding your capabilities on a single infrastructure to deploying across a mix of infrastructure targets, OpenShift provides single interface regardless of where it's deployed. And the same OpenShift experience is now available in two operational models if you're not aware. We have the managed OpenShift service delivered by Red Hat and its partners on leading public clouds. You still have your self-managed OpenShift solution where you control the operational experience on-premise or in the cloud for maximum control, flexibility, and customization if you're in a highly regulated environment such as financial services or the governments. And it's important to understand what separates OpenShift from other Kubernetes offerings in the market today is that Red Hat OpenShift is an enterprise-ready Kubernetes container platform that includes full-stack automated operations to manage the hybrid cloud and multi-cloud deployments, thus offering the simplicity and automation of the public cloud. It also includes enterprise-grade Linux operating system, container runtime, networking and monitoring solutions, as well as your authentication and authorization services. You can deploy Red Hat OpenShift on your choice of infrastructure, whether if you're on premise or in a private cloud. If you prefer not to manage the infrastructure, most public cloud providers offer Red Hat OpenShift as a managed service now, as I previously mentioned. And also include, it's important to note, that we also have new services added to the solution stack, such as advanced cluster management, advanced cluster security for Kubernetes, as well as the Quay image service. And one of the most important aspects of our platform is that we give customers the freedom of choice of what solutions in the market they want to deploy in their environments, so that they are not held to the only what Red Hat offers. And this is done with our OpenShift operators, which enable customers to automate deployment and maintenance of platform services and workloads. As you can see in this diagram, we have countless certified operators from our partners such as Portworx to enable quick deployments of their services onto the OpenShift platform. And just to spend a little bit of extra time on operators and their importance, for those who aren't aware, they automate a lot of day one, day two operations, such as provisioning, backup, scaling, etc., which would help DBAs, developers, sysadmins, etc., to focus on more project-centric and strategic tasks. These operators make databases more accessible and supported as well. And there's a variety of ISVs, as you can see here, that have made those custom operators available on Red Hat OpenShift. And Red Hat continues to actively work with ISVs to ensure that the operators are certified on OpenShift, they're secure, and have frequent, regular scans to ensure of their integrity. And all of these capabilities are additional tools and accelerators to help overcome the barriers along the digital transformation journey. Now, this is one of the most important parts of the presentation today as we get ready to bring Andy back in and talk about Portworx and the technologies they have today. And that's enabling one of the key initiatives for containerized and cloud-native application deployment, and that's the ability to move stateful cloud applications and host them in Kubernetes containerized environments, because these applications are driving new requirements for more reliable, persistent storage. Along with storing even ever larger amounts of data, organizations demand performance and portability, along with advanced features to support business continuity, given the importance of storage to application performance and availability. Application architects, developers, and other engineers need the ability to rapidly evaluate cloud storage offerings to understand what works best for their applications. So OpenShift and Kubernetes can handle stateful applications that require storage too. You know, when users claims for storage and OpenShift connects those applications, those claims to real storage volumes, that enables these stateful applications. And Andy will get more into that in the upcoming slides. And as you can see here, there's a broad spectrum of solutions. Again, we're all about customer's choice, but today we're going to focus on the Portworx solution to enable stateful applications, as well as such advanced features as cloud-native database services that are deployed on containers orchestrated by our Kubernetes solution. And before I leave you, just want to leave you with this thought process. It takes a change of mindset in this new world of technology that we're faced. It's a watershed moment for any company's ability to overcome tech obsolescence and enable the business with innovative technology to reduce time to market and create new business outcomes. IT is in a unique position to champion, lead, and implement application modernization initiatives successfully. However, in order to integrate legacy data and apps with new APIs and solutions, integration problems must be overcome quickly. The aim is to increase integration speed while reducing IT resources. Integrating with a cloud-native solution hosted on hybrid cloud infrastructure with pre-built solutions is the quickest path forward. With the future of the business on the line, IT has an opportunity to lead, albeit with a different mindset focused on innovation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacob. I love where you ended with this slide, because I think you touched on a lot of really important points, but I think this slide really gets to the heart of it. It's as we make this transition from kind of the existing world, the traditional world, to this new dynamic, app-driven, container-driven world, we have to shift our mindset, and that's true for the whole stack. Jacob talked a lot about how OpenShift is shifting the mindset for running applications, for managing applications, for helping you take those traditional apps and modernize them into a digital world where you can compete, especially with the acceleration in the digital world over the past 18 months. But something that we see over and over again on the Portworx side is that as customers start to go down this path, as they start to embrace this cloud native journey, as they start to scale this cloud native journey with those new processes, with those new people that Jacob touched on, they start running into storage problems. They start running into issues with, how do I make sure that all of those data requirements, all of those business requirements that I had in the traditional world, things like protecting user data, things like moving between different clouds or different endpoints or different on-premise locations, things like delivering the performance that I promised with my SLA. How do I do DR? How do I do backup and recovery? How do I do RBAC? How do I do compliance and governance? All of these kind of core storage and data management tasks that we know so well in the traditional world, as we scale in the cloud native world, they start to break, or they start to require a lot of manual intervention. They start to take time that you just don't have within your people and processes. And so it's this landscape that kind of brought Portworx to the fold and brought Portworx to start thinking about, how do we come up with something better to help make storage and data management services easier. Now, Jacob touched on this briefly, but why did this shift happen, and why is storage such a challenge in this world? It goes right back to that last slide. It's this shift from an infrastructure-centric legacy world to this app-centric Kubernetes world. In that traditional infrastructure world, in that legacy world, storage was wired to servers. The apps and infrastructure would live forever in one place. You would land an application on a physical server, and you would never move it, or you'd move it once a year, where you'd have downtime for a weekend so that you can move things around. You would provision the server and the storage, you'd monitor the server and the storage, you would back up the server and the storage, but everything you were doing was about the server and the storage. In the Kubernetes world, the application is king. The application is everything. So the application has been abstracted from the infrastructure, and it's fully automated with Kubernetes, with OpenShift, with the great tooling that Red Hat has put together to help put those apps into production. The apps come, they go, they grow, they scale up, they scale down, they move around, they spend some time on OpenShift on top of AWS, and then they move on-prem to an OpenShift on-prem location. You provision the app, you observe the app, you protect the app. All of these things are driven by what you're doing with the app, and the infrastructure follows. And our traditional storage world was not designed to support this mindset. Now, as we started thinking about how do we address this, we've really seen two approaches come to life in the industry aimed at solving this issue, that says, in the container world, I need a storage that can scale to tens of thousands of changes of API calls a day, to a world in which my application may move 5 times in a day, to a world in which I need to have container granular access to the individual volume associated with that application. And so we've seen these two approaches come to life in the industry. We've seen the connector approach, which is really driven by the CSI spec. The CSI spec, which helped us really move forward with persistent volume claims. But the challenge with the CSI spec is it's all about a one-to-one mapping of the container to the volume. And more importantly, it's all about mapping the underlying storage array to the application. And so what that means is we're still bound by the capabilities of the underlying storage array, but that storage array can't handle the scale and the rate of change that the application demands. We still have some challenges. If we want to introduce new innovations, we're limited by the OpenCSI spec. So we may be looking for something that CSI just hasn't gotten to in the community. And we still have to manage those storage arrays independently from Kubernetes. We lack the automation to automate down from OpenShift into the storage itself. And so the CSI approach is what I like to think of as a container-ready approach. It will work if you're starting to dabble in containers. It will provide you the ability to start to see what you can do. But if you're really trying to scale, it just doesn't quite fit the bill for what an enterprise-grade storage system should look like with Kubernetes. Now, the other approach is a container-native storage approach. And the container-native storage approach, you're virtualizing the underlying storage and actually putting it into the Kubernetes control plane. And by having this common pool that sits within the Kubernetes control plane, it allows us to scale, first of all, to the Kubernetes scalability, to provide that scalability we need as our applications grow. It also lets us ensure that we have consistent storage services across any infrastructure. So rather than it being dependent on the CSI spec for each underlying array, we have one set of consistent storage services for any infrastructure. And importantly, as we talked about on the previous slide, it lets us get that container granular and app consistent set of storage services that we need in a container first and an application first world. So when we do things like disaster recovery, when we do things like HA, when we do things like backup and restore, we can do all of that at the container granular level, which is something that CSI doesn't really allow us to do. And most importantly, and in my opinion, is because it sits within the Kubernetes control plane, the automation and the management is part of the overarching Kubernetes management. So the automation that Kubernetes brings to the table that OpenShift then enhances extends down into your storage and extends down into your data management. And so rather than spending time and resources managing the CSI spec, managing each individual storage array, you can automate many of those processes while having the kind of key storage services you need to go into production. So with that backdrop, let's talk a little bit about Portworx. So Portworx is the industry's leading Kubernetes data services platform. And our focus from the beginning has been to provide one single platform for any app, anywhere, on any Kubernetes distribution. Now, I know today we're talking about OpenShift, but this is a really important point to make. We are there to support you with a single control plane. So if you're using another Kubernetes distribution today and in the process of moving to OpenShift, or if you're using multiple Kubernetes distros, or if you acquire a new company and your company is using OpenShift and that company is using another Kubernetes distro, Portworx gives you a common control plane to migrate, to manage, to automate, to protect, all from that single control plane. And along those same lines, we also support any app. So we know that a lot of customers today are using multiple apps, many open source, multiple databases. And of course, if you had a team of hundreds or thousands, you can manage each individual app on its own, each individual database, each individual service. But that's not really realistic at most companies. So again, with Portworx, our ability to support any app allows that automation to be controlled from a single control plane with one person, with two people who are managing everything without having to have in-depth knowledge of each specific app that's running on top of OpenShift. And we also run on top of any cloud. So we know one of the hallmarks of OpenShift is that it supports true hybrid multi-cloud. So you can run OpenShift on-prem, you can run it on top of the IBM cloud, you can run it on top of AWS. You can kind of choose where you want it to run. Portworx travels with those movements. So whatever cloud you're using your Kubernetes distro on, we support that deployment. And on the same token, if you're running it on-prem, we support any infrastructure. So of course, we support Pure Storage. We're part of the Pure Storage family, but we by no means are limited to Pure Storage. And in fact, we are agnostic in our infrastructure. So whether you're using IBM infrastructure, NetApp, Dell, bare metal, we provide the same consistent set of storage and data management services. And we also travel through the entire stage of the application journey. So from the time you conceive it, the time you develop it and test it, to going live, to truly scaling it in production globally. So that's the overall platform. I want to talk a little bit now about what are those key use cases that we see on OpenShift, where we're really able to take everything that OpenShift is doing and help you really kick things into overdrive as you go into production with your apps on OpenShift. So the backdrop for this is really, there's a ton of apps running on OpenShift. This is a small handful, right? This is kind of just a small sampling. I know that Jacob showed a slide with all the ISV partners, and even that was a small sampling. There are tens and hundreds of apps running on OpenShift, and our goal is to provide the set of services I'm talking about for each and every single one of those apps. And the first place to really start is enterprise scalability and how we support scalability with OpenShift. So one of the most important things that we do by virtualizing the underlying storage is we provide the built-in high availability and scalability required by companies who are putting true production workloads onto OpenShift. So we're able to scale to thousands of nodes and hundreds of thousands of volumes, which is a scale and level of support that is unmatched. We're highly available, so we support topology-aware recovery in seconds. So we make things quick and easy for you to get back online. And we make it really easy to deploy and manage at scale. So we have a very interactive UI that makes it easy to point and click and to attach the correct storage class, the correct underlying storage to the OpenShift cluster or to that specific persistent volume claim. The next thing is PX Migrate. And this is a use case that we have seen quite a bit with OpenShift. And it kind of goes in two flavors. What you see on the screen here, someone is maybe moving OpenShift from on-prem to a public cloud. Maybe they're running it on a public cloud distro. Maybe they're running it with OpenShift on top of that public cloud. Or maybe it's the reverse. They're moving from the public cloud back to on-prem. The point is, as I talked about a minute ago, is we support this migration, this portability, without you having to rework anything, without you having to rewrite anything, without you having to move between different consoles or different UIs. So that movement from on-prem to the public cloud is seamless, and it helps you accelerate bursting, it helps you accelerate the movement of workloads, it helps you to quickly and easily optimize where that application sits. And particularly important along those lines is what we capture when we migrate things. So many other solutions may tout that they do migration, or they might tout that they make it easy for you to move things around. But most of those solutions are focused on just the data that you see down here at the bottom. They're focused on just the data. And the challenge with just moving the data is there's a whole set of other things attached to an application, to a stateful application, that are important. The Kubernetes objects, the app configuration. These are two vital things to making a quick and easy migration or a quick and easy backup. And so by capturing everything, by capturing not just the data, but the app config and the Kubernetes object, we make that migration simple, because when you relaunch it on a new infrastructure and a new location, you don't have to recheck and make sure that you captured the Kubernetes object correctly, or that you accidentally mistyped something in the app configuration so you can't get it back up and running. Because we've already captured it, it's simple and easy for you to make that migration. The next use case, kind of along those same lines that I want to talk about, is high availability and disaster recovery. So one of the things we're able to do within a metro area is provide high availability across OpenShift clusters sitting in that metro area. And what that means is we're able to provide synchronous data replication between those two clusters. They could be in different data centers within the metro area. And that really means we can provide a 0 RPO target for our customers. So we know that there are many big enterprises that have very low RPO requirements for key business applications. And so this ability to provide HA across the metro area and synchronous DR is a key requirement for many of those applications to go into production. And we're able to help solve that in conjunction with OpenShift. The other thing we're able to do is asynchronous replication. So by the same token, we know that there are some applications that may not require synchronous replication or 0 RPO, but having a low RPO is still important. And so with our asynchronous replication, we're able to, again, collect all of the data, all of the application configurations, and sync it across different points across the wide area network, excuse me. So you can have an RPO of minutes. So something fails in America, you can fail over to a site in Australia within minutes. And again, this is a very important requirement for many applications to go into production in a big way. The next one I want to talk about is backup and restore. This is, excuse me. Excuse me. This is another very important one to call out, backup and restore. A lot of our customers have a couple of key things driving their production requirements around backup and restore. Either compliance regulations, so there's some sort of compliance regulation that says I must back up this data, or I must hold this data for X number of years, or I must keep this data backed up in a specific locality. And then we have a number of customers who might have business requirements for the event of a disaster. So we must back up the last 7 days of data in case something happens to primary DR site, or we have to back up our data in 3 different sites in case something happens to site 1 and 2. This is a key requirement for a lot of companies. And again, what a lot of backup tools do is they focus just on the data. So the recovery from an event can take longer if you don't have the Kubernetes objects or the app configuration. What Portworx is able to do is provide app granular backup of the OpenShift cluster, of the OpenShift application, or even down to the container granular level. So it might just be, I want to capture these 3 containers, or the namespace level. I want to capture everything associated with the namespace demo, or I want to capture everything associated with the namespace production workload. We're able to maintain application awareness, capture the objects, capture the app configuration, capture the data, and back it up to any S3 endpoint, to Azure Blob Store, to a central archive, and then you can restore it wherever you want. So you can restore it back on-prem. Maybe it's to a different cluster on-prem. Maybe it's to a public cloud, so OpenShift running on AWS. Maybe it's OpenShift on Azure. We give you the flexibility to not only create the backups, capture the full backup, but restore to the point that makes the most sense for you at that point in time. So again, this is one of those key requirements that may not come to fruition when you start building your application, but when it's time to put it in production, you suddenly get this requirement from the security office, and we're able to quickly and easily solve it for our customers. Now, before I end, or before I kind of pause for some questions, I want to talk about 4 specific cases where we have been able to successfully implement Portworx with Kubernetes and really drive customer value, accelerate digital transformation with those customers. And the first is T-Mobile. T-Mobile is a very interesting case. So I think all of us are familiar with iPhone launches. There was just one a month ago. There happen once a year, and sometimes more often, but usually once a year. And as you can imagine, for the big telecoms like T-Mobile and Verizon and others, there's a surge in demand on those days that is unparalleled. Folks see the new iPhone and they immediately want to buy one. They want to find out, am I eligible for an upgrade? Is there a promo that T-Mobile is offering? Is there something I can do to be the first one that has a new iPhone? And so for a company like T-Mobile, their web has to be able to scale for that specific day or for that specific set of days. But the rest of the year, that volume doesn't exist. And so T-Mobile was having challenges with that scalability part, with that speed. By the same token, you also want to be able to respond quickly to an announcement you might not have expected. Maybe Apple comes out with a specific feature or a specific promotion that you weren't expecting. Well, as a customer like T-Mobile, you want to be able to roll out a new marketing campaign or roll out a new application to support that new feature. Well, T-Mobile not only was having trouble scaling their website, but also it was taking them 6 months to deploy new applications. By bringing Portworx into the fold from a scalability perspective, from an app delivery perspective, we were able to A, support the scalability of the website, and B, help them reduce their app deployment time from 6 months down to hours. So now when Apple announces a new iPhone, or when Samsung announces a new phone, or whatever the case is, T-Mobile can quickly respond and adapt and roll out new campaigns, new apps to support that launch in the afternoon and the next day. And that's critical in the digital world we live in. The next one is agility. So Roblox is a really interesting one. For those of you that don't know Roblox, Roblox is a big gaming company. I think at last check, they have 70+ million users. I think I just saw an article the other day that said they have something like 35 million hours of usage on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. I forget the scale, but we're talking about a company that has huge volumes of folks who are using the application, who are using the gaming platform. Now, go back to March 2020. At the beginning of the pandemic, they were nowhere near the size they are today. But as folks started coming home, as the pandemic became a reality, they saw a scale up to that 70 million that was as much in 1 week as the entire previous year combined. So think about that. They went from moving along, plodding along, as a company along the growth curve they expected, and all of a sudden they had this huge event that surged them in 1 week as much as they had the previous year. Now, you need two things to do that. You need a Kubernetes orchestration platform that can scale, and you need your storage and data that can scale. And so by working with Portworx, we were able to provide them the storage and data they needed to scale that platform and be able to seamlessly support that influx of folks coming on to Roblox in that week. And importantly, as many of us know with gamers, downtime isn't an option. So being able to scale and prevent downtime, being able to ensure that those gamers could enjoy the platform was critical. So that's the agility element of things. The next one is reliability. So RBC is a great use case. They're a customer that we have done a lot of work with our partners at Red Hat with OpenShift. And RBC is using OpenShift as a key foundation of their digital transformation. But they reached a specific app, a specific banking app, where the requirement from the business to go in production was 0 RPO. It was such a critical banking app that they could not afford any downtime for that app. And so they looked to Portworx and our PXDR capability that I talked about to provide that 0 DR capability, to provide that 0 DR requirement. And so we worked with them. We're able to have 2 completely independent data centers with a 0 DR requirement in place between the two, so that they could have confidence in taking that application, putting it in production on OpenShift, and scaling it as required, and ensuring they have the reliability demanded by the business for that app. So that is a really great example of how, as we're going along this curve in Kubernetes and putting more apps into production, solving a key business requirement by taking the best of the container platform with OpenShift and the best of Portworx to really provide the solution that makes sense for a customer. And then the last one is cost saving. So of course, people go into digital transformation for a number of reasons, and cost isn't always number one. In fact, for Audi Business Innovation, cost was not the reason they embarked on a digital transformation journey. They embarked on it for speed. They embarked on it for agility. They embarked on it for reliability. But along the way, Portworx was able to optimize their processes and optimize the storage and data management. So I mentioned on an earlier slide the ability for us to scale within a single node, within a single cluster, to hundreds of thousands of volumes. By providing that scale and providing that density, we were able to help them cut their AWS storage bill by 60%. So they not only benefited from the speed, the agility, and the reliability, but from the density of application deployment and from some of our automated operations tools, our autopilot scaling and up and scaling down allowed them to cut their storage bill by 60%. So I'm going to leave you guys with these 4 because I think these are a really great example of how Portworx and OpenShift can work together to solve the real business challenges that you, our customers, see, which is, how do I reduce apps so I can compete in this world? how do I scale when I have an influx of new customers who are trying to get my product? How do I keep them online and happy? How do I make sure that as I embrace this new digital world, this new digital mindset, that the apps I have are reliable and they meet the 0 RPO requirement from the business? And then last but not least, how do I save money? How do I do all this and save money and go back to my business and say, this is a great win for all of us all around? And so that's where I want to leave you. One last slide, and then I'll turn it over to some questions. We have a few great ways to get started. Of course, if you want to find out more about getting started with OpenShift specifically, visit the OpenShift website. There's a lot of ways for you to try OpenShift. If you want to try Portworx with OpenShift, we have 3 ways that you can do so. We have an essential offer that is forever free for small production applications. We have an enterprise 30-day free trial, so you can try all the features that I talked about and more, the DR, the HA, the scalability, the autopilot. You can do all of that, and you can try it on top of your OpenShift environment with our 30-day free trial. And then if you're only interested in, say, the backup piece, that's the only piece that you really need today, we actually offer backup as a standalone product, and we have a free 30-day trial for that. So you can try that out and see if that works with your applications. And all that you can get started with today at portworx.com/free trial. So with that, I want to pause and turn it over to Scott for some questions, and hopefully we've left you with some great things to think about with Portworx and OpenShift today.
Super. Thanks, Andy and Jacob. Appreciate those. There's a lot of really good information there, and I appreciate those case studies too. So I do have a few questions for you. The first one is, why Portworx versus alternative storage solutions that support OpenShift?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So there's a couple things that I touched on briefly, but I didn't necessarily call out on the slide. So first and foremost, Portworx is built from the ground up to be container native, Kubernetes first. And a lot of the storage options we see out there have been adapted from that traditional world to the container world, but they weren't built from the ground up for containers. So they don't necessarily speak namespace, or they don't necessarily speak Kubernetes, or they don't necessarily speak the language of OpenShift. Because we architected from day 0 to support full-scale production deployments on Kubernetes, Portworx is able to provide that container granular, that application-aware, the topology-aware storage and data management that is really important for this app-centric world that OpenShift and Kubernetes provides. The other thing that I think is really kind of critical for folks as they think about this is, I go back to that slide that talked about all the openness that Portworx provides. And one of the things that, there's a lot of great vendors out there, and they do a lot of really great things that are very, targeted at a specific area of storage and data management, or might be targeted at a specific deployment configuration. What we are able to do with Portworx is provide you a single control plane, so that as you go throughout your journey, you don't have to think about storage and data again. You have gone down the path of storage and data management, and whether you are on OpenShift on-prem, whether you're deploying it on top of AWS, whether you acquire a new company that has added a new database or a new data service that you haven't seen before, or is running on a different Kubernetes distro, or is running on a different public cloud, or is running on different infrastructure, you don't have to think about storage and data management again. We make it easy and simple for you to kind of think about it and then forget it. And I think that's a key thing that really differentiates us in the marketplace from many of the other storage vendors out there.
Okay, great. Hey, Andy, you talked a bit about container storage interface, or CSI. I'm sure mileage varies, but I wonder if you can talk about some of the differences you see in performance between CSI and a container native storage approach like Portworx.
Absolutely. So this is another really interesting area is, CSI. First of all, CSI is great. CSI is what really allowed us to take this concept of Kubernetes and containers and move them from an ephemeral, stateless concept to a stateful framework that can actually move us to a really interesting place from a digital transformation journey. It really allows us to actually put apps into production. And so CSI certainly provides a lot of value, but the really big challenge with CSI is you're beholden to the CSI driver itself, and that CSI driver being tagged to an individual storage array or an individual set of storage arrays. And so what I mean by that is if a certain company or team or the open source community only wants to implement a certain set of features for that array, and then you go to a different array and it has a different set of features, you might have a mismatch within your own environment. So maybe you have one storage array where they're really forward thinking with their CSI driver. They've been able to implement some great scalability. They've implemented some other automation to help coordinate the storage growth in the Kubernetes platform. But then you have another one where the CSI driver is lagging behind. Maybe it doesn't support the latest Kubernetes release or the latest OpenShift release. You get mismatches in your environment, and you really have challenges with scaling up because every array has its own CSI driver with its own set of capabilities and its own set of characteristics. And so taking a container native storage approach where you have a single software-defined storage layer like Portworx helps you eliminate that headache, right? We take care of virtualizing whatever the underlying storage is so that you don't have to think about, does this CSI driver have the same set of capabilities as everything else that I'm running Kubernetes on top of? Does this CSI driver support backup? Does this CSI driver do X, Y, Z? With a software-defined storage layer, we handle all of that by virtualizing it and make it kind of seamless for the end customer. And ultimately, the reason you go adopt Kubernetes and more specifically OpenShift in the first place is to make it easy for yourself so that your application developers can focus on building new applications that you can put in production so that you can delight your customers. And so the less you have to think about storage and the data, the better. And that's really the difference. CSI, you're gonna have to spend a lot of time updating drivers, thinking about drivers, figuring out how they match up and coordinating them with Kubernetes. A container native storage approach with Portworx frees you from spending that time and really having to figure that out.
Okay, great. Hey, finally, a question about the sweet spot. You talked about the massive scale of the platform, and it's really impressive. But is there a minimum scale where customers begin to see value from using Portworx with OpenShift? Is it right away at any scale, or do you need to have a pretty large deployment to start to see a difference? And it's funny because on this slide here, you've got the forever free, which that kind of leads into that question. Is like, what is sort of the point where people need to think about moving from the free version to into enterprise?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I'll give my thoughts, and Jacob, if you have any thoughts, feel free to chime in. The place where there's a lot of value, this real pivot point, in my view and my experience, is when you move to true production, and that might mean different things for different companies. For some companies, there might be a small production set of applications, right? And so maybe something like Essentials is great because you're only putting a couple apps in production, and you don't need the scale. And so something that is forever free, like Portworx Essentials, can solve your needs and still provide those business requirements. But that production is the key thing, because stateless workloads or non-production workloads, they can come and go, and you're not putting them out for a customer. You're not necessarily having those stringent requirements around HA and DR and backup. But as soon as those requirements come into place, it's really important that you have a platform that can address those requirements. Because if you don't, you'll end up in a situation where something happens out of your control, and all of a sudden your website goes down for 8 hours. Your key booking application goes down for 8 hours. Your web interface, your shopping portal goes down, and that could be hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. A great example of this that we saw recently is, I think it was 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, by the time this recording, by the time folks are listening to this, AWS went down. I think we all saw this. There was I think they termed it kind of a brownout of AW East 1. Now, imagine you're running any size scale of OpenShift on top of AW East 1. Could be a small production workload, could be a big production workload. Now, AW East 1 goes down, and it goes down for 8 hours, and they have some challenges, and they push something out eventually. Now, the app you have on OpenShift on AWS might not be important, but let's say it's your booking app. Let's say it's your key app for your business. That 8 hours, like I said, could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you have something like Portworx on the back end, you could use our DR capability, that sync DR that I talked about, or that async DR. So as soon as you see AW East 1 go down, you fail it over to your OpenShift cluster on West 2. You're down for no time, or you're down for 5 minutes, and you're back up and running. And so it's that's critical, and that is something you need for a production workload. So that's why my answer to the question is not so much how big is your deployment, but where is it in the journey? Because as soon as you have something production, it's really important that you solve those key business requirements, so you aren't in a situation where your app goes down, or where your key set of apps goes down.
Yeah, and Andy, I would just add that, from the Red Hat perspective, we live with the community, right, upstream in the open source world. So we understand that there are, these free offerings available. But to your point, when you get into that enterprise mindset and you're doing production workloads that run your business, that is when you need the support and the advanced feature set, as you mentioned, to survive a brownout with one of the public cloud providers. And also, I really do believe it's essential to offer these free offerings at the beginning, because the mindset of a customer, and all of this has changed from the traditional huge procurement of an enterprise product at the beginning before even deploying it and leveraging that technology. Instead, it's all about adoption and establishing that standard at your business and your IT shop. And so once you're able to identify which solutions, such as Portworx and OpenShift, and the teams and the app teams and the business buy into that, now you're available to move into that enterprise offering that gives you those more advanced features so that you can continue along the journey and grow your business and grow your application portfolios into cloud native solutions to support these advanced use cases for these distributed systems, as you alluded to earlier. So from that perspective, we have to have these free offerings so you can try them out and see if they work for you, right? Instead of buying it and throwing it away. Those days are behind us, and so we support it, and we ask that the customers go out and try these technologies to see if they're right for them.
Okay, well, Jacob and Andy, I think that's a great place to leave it. Thanks a lot for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's been great, and again, we hope you guys have found this helpful, and please, don't hesitate to reach out. Again, my email is at the top of the presentation, and please reach out to us for a free trial, or to the OpenShift team to try out OpenShift if you haven't yet today. And we hope to see you at a future webinar, and continue to talk to you guys about all the great things we're doing with Portworx and OpenShift.
Sounds good. And so, if you could, I just wanted to put this poll question up here, just about what additional information you'd like about the Portworx solution. I've got a bunch of options up there, and I'll also point out that in the handout section, we do have that link to the free trial that Andy was just talking about, for Portworx. So I'll just leave that up there for another minute or so to give everybody time to click on the assets that they're interested in. And before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business. It's the prize drawing for the $300 Amazon gift card. And the winner of the gift card is Nick Gower from Oregon. So congratulations to Nick. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Andy and Jacob for putting together a really informative presentation and for all their insights in the Q&A. I'd also like to thank Pure Storage and Red Hat for making this event possible. And last but not least, I'd like to thank all of you for attending and for your questions. So that concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.